Hello and welcome to I'll Knit If I Want To. I'm Andrea Mowry of Drea Renee Knits, and this is a little weekly podcast where I do my best to answer some of your questions. Today I am wearing my just released traveler shell. So this is a sweet little open cardie that you can throw on over all kinds of things with giant pockets. The pockets are my favorite. So this is knit up in La Bien Aimée, Helix, and Kumo, and those are two lace weight bases. One is a gray-based woolly Gotland Falkland Merino blend, and the other one is a super fuzzy, soft Surrey alpaca with a mulberry silk core. And together they make this beautiful, haloed, delightful fabric. And not only is this my newest pattern, but it is the pattern for this year's Insta Friends Knit Along, which is in its 7th year, which is just amazing to me. Time is flying by. I actually wish it would slow down a little. But I'm so excited for the Insta Friends Knit Along. So this was dreamt up by my friend Jess, who owns La Mercerie, a shop that sells all kinds of fun yarny goods and some haberdashery. I love to get buttons from her shop. But anyways, she has been running this on Instagram for years. It's a very casual knit along. You just participate on Instagram, you post your photos, and you use the hashtag, which is InstaFriendsKnitAlong, KAL. 2023 for this year. And you can also tag Jess. So I have all that information up. It went out in my newsletter this week, and it's also on my Instagram if you want to find all that info for you. And it's just really fun. It's a relaxed knit along. You've got, I think, 2 or 3 months to knit the sweater. So it's really just about making some new friends and knitting together. So it's one I look forward to every year. And I feel so honored that Jess has chosen to use my patterns since the beginning. Am I forgetting anything else about this sweater? I don't think so. All right, let's jump into some questions. Question number 1 actually has to do with the traveler shell. Yarns suitable for Florida for this pattern. So I use 2 lace weight yarns. I would say my one apprehension about using what I used in Florida is I personally don't love wearing anything with a halo, anything fuzzy in the heat. It can kind of irritate my skin if I'm really warm. So that's where I would be a little bit cautious, but you could use just 2 strands of the wool yarn I used. I personally don't have a huge problem with wearing wool even in the warmer months, especially in a place like Florida where you go into any restaurant, store, movie theater, and the AC is so intense. I like having something that I can throw on, but you could absolutely try another yarn that's maybe blended with a little bit of cotton or linen. The one thing I will say is just make sure you get gauge. You're gonna need to do a bigger swatch because this stitch pattern likes to grow after blocking. And if you do use a yarn that has an even greater propensity to grow, which some plant-based fibers can, especially like cotton, then you really wanna make sure that you're getting a good reading on your gauge. So if you needed to shorten up any of the length anywhere, that you know to do that. You could use 2 lace weights held together, or you could even use like a silk. I wonder if you use a silk lace weight, because that would be nice in warmer weather. Anyways, and I do think you could also try subbing in either a fingering or sport weight yarn. They can vary a lot. I have seen all kinds of yardage to weight amounts on both fingering and sport weight yarns. So again, just doing a gauge swatch and making sure that you are swatching in the stitch pattern and washing that swatch and letting it dry so you can really see. And I would measure it before and after so you can really see its growth, so that you know that it's gonna work out for you. But if you do decide to do it, please let us know if you have success with the yarns you choose, because that's always so helpful for other people who might also live in a warmer climate and want to be able to adjust the pattern accordingly. Next question. I'm working on your Traveler, which is the hoodie version. So this texture probably looks a little familiar. I used it in the Traveler hoodie and crew neck that I released this past winter. I loved that texture so much that I wanted to use it again. So it may look familiar. This knitter is working on the original Traveler and have noticed that my cast on is too tight. So all of these patterns are knit from the bottom up, so that is their cast on edge. I'm well into the pattern and the body circumference seems to fit great. I don't want to frog. Can you suggest methods for reworking the cast on? Could I pull back the bottom ribbing and somehow add some extra stitches and or use larger needles to bind off a new hem? Okay, so you can absolutely attempt some sweater surgery here. You could snip into that cast on edge, unravel, which is going to be a little finicky because you're doing it backwards. It's not like undoing a bind off. Undoing a bind off, you can just kind of unzip it. Undoing a cast on edge, sometimes you have to like fiddle with it. If you choose to do that, you could attempt to just take out a few rows and then bind off. You will probably lose just a couple rows of length, but if that's okay for you, you could definitely try that. The thing about this is your knitting is now going in the opposite direction once you have it back on your needles. So it's going to be a half a stitch off and facing the other way. So those knit stitches and purl stitches aren't going to be perfectly lined up in their original columns. So another option would be to just cut off that whole hem, throw those stitches on your needle and knit a new hem down from the body of the sweater and then bind off loosely. You can bind off however you see fit to keep it loose. You can still do the tubular bind off. You can try going up a needle size or two, whatever you need to do to get that stretch your bind up so it doesn't feel so tight. So here are things to think about. I would be curious how far into the body of your Traveler you are, because if you don't feel comfortable doing the sweater surgery, now is the time to frog. And I know that's probably not what you want to hear, but if you're comfortable doing the sweater surgery, you don't mind snipping into your knit a little bit and fixing that hem, you think of it as a fun adventure, then do it. But if you think you're going to get a little stage fright and be like, I actually don't want to have to do that, then now is the time to unravel and reknit before you go any further. Ask me how I know, because experience tells me that what I do is I keep knitting and I keep setting it down, going, this little thing is bothering me, but I don't want to have to start over. So I'll just keep going. And then I knit another row or two and then I set it back down. And I'm like, oh, it's really bothering me, but I really don't want to start over. And so you just keep inching along painfully, not enjoying the process anymore because you're worried about the thing that's bugging you. So if that's you and you don't want to do any sweater surgery, unravel now and re-go. Because the thing is, now you've already knit some of that body once. You're liking the way it's fitting, so you're gonna blow through it. You're confident in how it's gonna be. You just gotta redo that cast on edge and the rest is gonna feel great and you're already comfortable with the pattern. So the second knitting will probably go a bit quicker and be really enjoyable because now you're totally confident in what you're doing and you can just be joyful as you do it. So that's the only little bug I wanted to put in your ear, was just think about that piece and make sure you're happy with your options. And I'm gonna continue, but I'm gonna have to go do sweater surgery, or at least I'm not done with the whole thing. Maybe you are by now, but if you're not done yet and you're only a few inches into the body, you might wanna just unravel and reknit it. And again, even with your cast on to do, let's say you did start over and so you're going to recast on. Again, you can go up a needle size for that cast on. And I also just will do, it depends on what cast on you're doing. If you're doing the tubular, it should be fairly loose already. That's one of the nice things about a tubular cast on is that they're flexible. But you could go up a needle size. If you're not doing the tubular cast on and you're doing a different one, then what I like to do is check it every inch or two and just give it a little tug and make sure it has nice flexibility. And I like to do that a lot for bind offs because it's really easy to not realize that you're over tugging your bind off yarn. And so I just give it a little stretch test, and that way I can adjust as I go. You know, it's a lot better if you adjust after an inch than after lots of inches, because after just 1 inch, you can adjust a little bit and it's not going to be super noticeable or inconsistent. So I like to do that little stretch test to make sure everything feels nice and flexible, because in general, we don't usually ever want a tight cast on or bind off, right? It's not very comfortable on our body. So I like to do that. You can't do it with the tubular cast on because it's such a loose cast on that you can't really stretch and check it. Okay, next question. Oh, where am I? Right here. I have recently converted to Magic Loop for sock knitting, and it has made sock knitting so much more enjoyable for me. Yay! I love when we find the way we need to do the thing that makes it just feel better. Like it ratchets that little joy meter up. And I love that. There are so many options available for lots of the things we do in knitting. And so figuring out the one that works best for you, nice move. So you're loving the Magic Loop and you want to know if you can also do it for your sleeves. You sure can, my friend. It is absolutely an option. Can you use your chiaogoo needles for that? Yes, you can. That's what I use. What cord length would you recommend? So I personally prefer a longer cord than a shorter cord. Trying to do Magic Loop on a shorter cord, if I don't have quite enough to make my 2 loopies, just annoys me. So I usually do between a 32 inch and a 40 inch. Those are my sweet spots for cord length. So I would do one of those. And what is my preferred method for knitting sweater sleeves? Magic Loop. Unless I'm doing like all over color work, and that's when I pull out my shorties, because that is when it can start to drive me a little bonkers having the jump in Magic Loop or DPNs, whatever you're choosing. I don't love the little leapfrog we have to do at the new needle. And so that's when I like those little chiaogoo shorties, because when you're doing something where you have floats and stuff like that, like in color work, it's nice to just have it be consistent. I find that my tension's a little more consistent then. But generally speaking, I'm always Magic Looping. I've always used double pointed needles, but am intrigued by the thought of using Magic Loop if possible. Absolutely, you 100% can do that. I mean, really, a sock is just like a sleeve. And the other thing that I personally love about it is it means that when I have my case of interchangeable needles, I have everything I need to do my project, because I can change out the cord length, the needle tips, all of that, and I'm using the same thing no matter if I'm doing large circumference, small circumference, whatever it is. So that's one of the reasons why I default to Magic Loop, because I don't have to worry about carrying my DPNs around. I am currently knitting a sweater. The pattern wants me to duplicate stitch a pattern onto the sweater once I am done knitting. Should I block the sweater before and then duplicate stitch, or should I duplicate stitch before blocking? I feel like there are pros and cons to both. Or should I block it twice so the knit stitches relax as well as the duplicate stitches? So this is one of those ones where I'm going to give an answer and I'm just going with my gut feeling. So if somebody has another answer that they would like to share and they have a lot of experience in the realm of duplicate stitch, please feel free to weigh in. But my thought is to block twice. I think I would block the sweater so everything's lying flat and nice, and those original stitches have shimmied their way into the shape they want. And then I would duplicate stitch, and then I would block again, because then I want those duplicate stitches to settle in and start to zhuzh up and lock in place. So that's what I would do, is I would block twice. Yeah. There's variables. I think you're right. I think there could be pros and cons to either side. Part of it could depend on what kind of yarn you're using and how much does it change after blocking. You know, if there's a yarn that's not really gonna change a whole lot post blocking, maybe you could get away with just knitting the thing, duplicate stitching, and doing one block. But especially if you're using two different yarns, like let's say you're using a superwash for the sweater, but you're using a non-superwash for your duplicate stitch. I personally would want to block that superwash sweater first because it's going to grow, and then I would duplicate stitch and block again, because my non-superwash yarn's probably not going to block out the same way that my superwash yarn is. So I'd want to do like one step and then the second step. So that's what I would do. One thing I will say is I'm guessing if you're doing some duplicate stitch, you are using contrasting colors so that you can see your beautiful stitching. So maybe make sure to do a little color safety test to make sure that the color of the yarn that you're going to use is color fast if it's been dyed, and that it's not going to bleed on to the sweater you're making. I'm not trying to worry you at all, but that might just be a helpful step to do, just to make sure if you're using really high contrast yarns, you know, like a white sweater with some red stitches or something. All right. Hi, Andrea. Even though I'm not a spinner, I'm intrigued about the fleece you bought at New York Sheep and Wool. My question is, what is the process you need to go through to get the fleece ready to spin? Thanks for asking. I love that you're not a spinner and you're still curious. So I did actually remember to bring up my little locks here, which you may have noticed me kind of fiddling with in the beginning of the episode. So let's kind of hold those up. Let's see if I can get that too. Come on. I want you to focus. Ooh, see that pretty crimp right there? Ooh la la, ooh la la. So this is my fleece. It is merino Corriedale, and it's dark brown but has little bits of silver, like there's a little bit of gray in there, and I love it. And we happen to have one last glorious spurt of like end of summer weather here. So we had 2 days where it was gonna be sunny and 70, surrounded by the very next day it was gonna drop 30 degrees. So I was like, okay, I gotta bust a move. I don't want to store a dirty fleece and not feel like I can wash it because we've had so much rain this year. So it's like, it's just gonna take a long time to dry, and I don't have a ton of space in my house to try and dry it inside. I did take a picture. I will share it. I will remember to share that in my Instagram stories. I did take a picture of it all laid out on our outdoor table, trying to get it dry in the sun before the sun went away. So what I did, and I'll preface this by saying there's lots of things you could do to prepare the fleece. Everyone has their own way they like to do it. This is my first time doing it. I am no pro, but I got some tips from my friends. I looked at some things online and in books, and this is what felt easy and like I could do it in the limited amount of time I had. So what I did was I went through my fleece and got out the really, really funky bits. Like there is going to be some parts of a fleece that maybe you just want to compost because they're a little too funky, or also looking for lots of like vegetable matter, like hay and stuff like that, and second cuts, which is when you have when the shearer had to do his second pass, and so you have these little tiny things that you don't really want to leave that in your fiber because they'll just turn into pills. So I went through and kind of sorted it like that and kind of got out as much VM, you know, shook out some VM, and then I started washing it. So to wash it, I used unicorn scour, which I can get at Port Fiber, my local fiber shop. And I basically ended up with each bag of fleece, and I had, how many did I have at the end? Somewhere between 4 and 6 that I did. So I use laundry bags. So like what you would maybe put your delicates in, your undergarments in to wash them. I use some of those to wash the fleece, and that's just so it doesn't all drift apart in the sink. It's a lot easier to get it in and out of the sink, especially when you have to wash and rinse it multiple times. When it's in one of those laundry bags, I can just hold it to the side, drain out the water, refill the sink, and do it again. So for me, I washed everything except for the dirtiest bit. I think I did 3 washes. And so with diluting that unicorn scour more and more each time. So the first time, a lot of people do it by weight or volume. And some people do like their sink to a certain temperature. So no one touch me. It's actually a little nerve-wracking to be like, this is what I did. Maybe it was wrong, I don't know, but everything's clean and it seemed to be okay and I didn't felt it. But I basically did my laundry sink pretty warm. And I started with like 3 capfuls of unicorn scour, let it soak for 20 minutes, drained it. Next, I did 2 capfuls, 20 minutes, drain it, 1 capful, 20 minutes, drain it. And then I did 2 rinses. And so I did that. I mean, it took me a full day to wash all of this because, you know, you only have so much space and then you're waiting for each, you know, for these 20-minute lots. And so then after that, I spread it all out and let it dry. And now I have it all in a bin, actually, in a clean bin. And I kind of sorted it again. Oh, for the dirtiest bunch that I still wanted to attempt to save, I did some extra washing and rinsing on that one because I knew it was going to be the funkiest bit. It was muddy and just kind of... So then I did kind of another sorting where as I was getting it into the bin, I went through again and kind of stacked it up kind of by lock size. I also needed to clear off all the dry fleece so that anything that was still damp had more space to spread out and keep drying. So that's one of the reasons why I started organizing it again in a bin. And as I went, again, picking out second cuts I had missed, more of that VM, all that kind of stuff. So after all of that, this was a multi-day process. And finally, yesterday morning, I got the rest of what I consider the good stuff in my bin for when I'm ready to tackle it. And then I had my patch of like, okay, here's my funky stuff. It still has the most VM stuck in it. It's different lengths. It's not in nice neat locks anymore. Like it's just kind of a scraggly pile. And I didn't want to mix it into my nice locks because I didn't want any of that remaining VM that I was having trouble getting out, now getting into the nice locks. So I was like, all right, I'm just gonna make a little bat out of this and it'll be like my tester bat and we'll see how it goes. So I brought it up so you guys can see my little bat baby. So here is my first bat from my fleece. So this is made out of the funky bits. So you can't actually see them too much, but there's you can see like a little guy right there. There is quite a bit of VM in here. I have picked out so much of it. And see, here's some. Oop, the little guy, which you won't be able to see because it wants to see my face. So lots of these little guys in their little seed pods, hay, you know. And I'm sure I will continue to pull some of it out as I spin it, and probably even more out as I then knit it. It's just the way it's gonna go. But I have to say, I was nervous. I was nervous about buying a fleece. I was nervous that it would feel like a chore, that I would be like, oh my gosh, I don't have time for this. My life is already too busy and I just want everything to slow down, as I mentioned earlier. So what am I doing buying a dirty fleece to deal with when I can buy prepped fiber to spin? But I'm so happy I did. I've enjoyed every part of the process, and I actually found such a solace in it in the past couple weeks as a lot of heart-aching things are happening around the world. There was something about being in this meditative place with this fiber and picking hay out of it and just being like, this is what I can focus on right now. And I can just sit here and sort the locks and pick out the hay and avoid the real stinky bits and put it in a bath and rinse it out. And it was just this, you do this step and this step and this step. And it just really ended up being really what I needed at that time was this, just follow the steps and do the thing. And I am so tickled with how it turned out. I love it. It's a squishy little pillow. So the question is, will I throw this on a wheel and do long draw, or will I use it to practice my support spindle? I think I might use it to practice, because why not? I mean, how special would that be to use my first bat of this fleece I got this year and the supported spindle I bought at Rhinebeck as well, and let them teach me this new thing. So anyways, oh, and then how did I do this? You might want to know. Oh no, sorry, I thought there was something on the screen. There was not. I'm actually a little embarrassed. It was, so many of you know I'm very low tech. I use my phone to do these. There's no special lights or equipment or cameras. It's just my phone. And it was just the little yellow box that like follows your face around. And I thought it was like a piece of yarn. Anyways, so then to make this lovely little guy, I just did this on my drum carder. So again, once you've cleaned your fleece, you now have loads of options on how you are going to prep that fiber to spin it. And maybe that's the part you were really interested in. Here I am giving you the long story of how you wash it. But so to spin it, I have tried hand carders and they really triggered my carpal tunnel from when I was a baker. I think I've shared that on here before. So I just used my drum carder, which looks like a big round drum covered in bristles, wire bristles, and you put your fiber in and you crank it and it feeds around this drum and kind of stretches it out and makes it do this. And I did 3 passes to achieve this. The first time you do it, it's kind of funky. So like every time you do it, it gets a little more uniform. And then that's a really great prep for spinning woolen because everything's kind of jumbled. So it'll be full of air and be really nice. So that is my plan for basically the whole fleece, is to use the drum carder. I have not tried hand combs. I was a little worried that the combs might also mess with my wrists, but maybe not. I haven't tried them yet. I'm definitely open to trying them. So I think I would want to take a class to do that kind of stuff. So if I decide to try even hand cards again or something like that, I think I would want to do it in a class so I had some guidance, especially just with body positioning as you're doing it. But I used a drum carder to make it easy on myself, and I'm super excited with what I got, and I can't wait to spin it. All right, I am going to do one last question and then we'll be done. All right, I am new to spinning and totally jumped in 2 feet first. As a visual learner, I have been hoping to find better videos for seeing the different drafting styles: forward draft, supported long draw, etc. Do you have any visual resources to help learn this better to become a more consistent spinner? So I totally get that. I think with spinning, it can be really hard to pick those things up from like a book or somebody telling you. Like, it is very visual. A lot of the fiber arts are very visual. So I would recommend, and I'm typing it, that's why I'm getting this wrong down. I would recommend, I believe it's called From Worsted to Woolen. And that is a class that you can find on Craftsy. And JC Boggs from Ply Magazine teaches it. And I love it because it took out all the scaries for me in trying to do long draw. I really wanted to do long draw. I felt like, I don't know if I can ever do this. I did end up taking a class for long draw that my friend Mel teaches that was also like so helpful. So if you can find an in-person class, that can just be so lovely because they might be able to spot like, oh, do this to your wheel and it's going to be easier. Or I recommend using this, or they can look over you and see what you're doing and catch little things. But if that's not a possibility for you, then I did really love this Craftsy class. JC, you start off by just doing woolen drafts. So you do like short forward, short backward. And what I loved about it is you use every style as a stepping stone to the next style, which is how it took out those scaries for me. Because I was like, oh, okay, like I can do this. And now I'm just doing it a little bit differently. And a little bit differently, and a little bit differently. And so it just worked for me. And again, I think the visuals were really good. So that's what I'd recommend. And I'll throw a link to it so that you have it. All right. As I said, there's a knit along. Again, this is the Traveler Shell. There is a knit along for it. It's just right on Instagram. I'll throw that hashtag below as well so you can find that. Don't want to forget. And in just a couple days, 4 or 5 days, there will be another pattern and knit along heading your way. It is November. And so we are headed right into our November knit along challenge that I think is also maybe on its 7th year. Wow. And I think Rhinebeck, we had our 8th year. All of these seem to have started around a similar time. I must have gotten really knit along happy. I do love knit alongs. It's such a great way to make friends near and far and just have that camaraderie while you're knitting something and working on a project. For me, it always just makes it more exciting to be able to geek out about all the little details and, oh, what are you doing? And what are your tips? And, oh, this happened. What do I do? So I do love a knit along. So the knit along challenge is coming. It is in November and it stretches over about 4 days and we make a pair of socks. And so that pattern is coming Tuesday and it's a special collaboration that will also help benefit something that I love to try to help bring more attention to. So I'm excited to share that with you. So if you're not already subscribe to my newsletter. You get special discount on pattern releases and all the info for the knit along and all that good stuff. And I hope to see you here next week. If you're going to be at Sacred Sheep tomorrow, I will be there as well. I'm doing 2 workshops for this podcast actually. And I'm also going to be doing a meet and greet. All that info is on the site. So I hope to see you there if you're going to be there. And otherwise, I hope to see you here next week. Have a great weekend, everybody.